Ask Chuck.
Watching your Decision Desk stream tonight and wanted to share a quick thought. I've heard you mention how Dem favorability is low despite great results. As a Democratic county official, I'd probably tell a pollster I feel unfavorably too. I think, by the way, you're not alone. I think one of the reasons Chuck Schumer's numbers suck, it's not just Republicans that don't like him, it's fellow Democrats that don't like him. Anyway, the party failed to keep Trump out. Yep. But like many hardcore Dems, I'm still walking through fire to vote next November. There's a real internal grievance this time, not just among independents, Pete. Pete, I think you're right. And I know this. I mean, it was the same thing we saw, in the run up to when the Republicans went ahead and got behind Trump. If you recall, you would start to see growing disapproval of Republican officials by Republicans. And there was a time where Democrats were reading that as if, oh, Republicans are sour on their own side, that they wouldn't support Republicans. That isn't the case. And I think you make an important point. I want to single out a line you said, because this to me is the single most, I think it's the biggest reason why a chunk of voters are so sour in the Democratic Party. The party failed to keep Trump out. Joe Biden had one job. He was elected to do one thing: turn the page on Donald Trump. And he didn't do it. Now, you can say he tried and failed. You can say he pursued it the wrong way. You could say he was the wrong man for the job. We could go through a variety of reasons. But I do believe that the anger at Joe Biden is all about he and he alone is why Donald Trump is back. And I think there are going to be Democrats that will hold Biden to account on the return of Donald Trump for the rest of their lives. It is why Joe Biden can't raise money for his library. It is why Joe Biden got invited to exactly one campaign rally over the last 3 months, and it was for the Nebraska State Party. Democrats, rank and file, activist Democrats, independents that didn't like Trump, right? The anger is not at Trump anymore. Yes, that anger is still there. And like you, we've seen this, right? Which is, I don't like the Democratic Party. They were so bad at their job, they brought back the return of Donald Trump. But it doesn't mean you're not going to not vote for an opposition to Donald Trump, right? So I get where you're going here. But I do think the single biggest sort of elephant in the room that Democrats haven't had this full conversation. But what the real anger about Biden was, like, you had one job and you failed to do that job, and you instead sort of let people whisper in you, and you let your presidency get hijacked by the left in ways that you thought was a good idea. And all you did was create a situation where Donald Trump came back. Again, some of it may not have been in his control, but I think for many voters that, Joe Biden was, very few Democrats had Joe Biden as their first choice. He was pretty much everybody's, nobody's last choice. And he was everybody's second or third choice. But the assumption was he was going to be a calming presence and he was going to be able to turn the page. I do think, and I'm going to point you back to my Substack this week, I do think why the single most important attribute that I think Democratic voters are going to be looking for in the next Democratic presidential nominee is somebody who's ready to act, somebody who isn't sloganeering, but is doing, right? I think one of the reasons why Gavin Newsom has, frankly, it shocked me, but he has sort of rocketed to already the top of any presidential primary poll you ask, whether it's a poll of Democrats in New Hampshire, a national primary poll, or you pick a state. And he is somewhere in the top 3. And the other 2 usually are AOC, Bernie. Bernie actually elects her Senate. You'll see AOC there. She's already been a national figure for some time. And then you might see Pete Buttigieg, who's run for president before. It's more impressive to me that Gavin Newsom, who's never run before and really did not have a national identity before the last 6 months. I know those of us in politics think of Gavin Newsom as a guy that's been around a while, but he's really been a star in California, not necessarily a national figure. He's a national figure now. And I think Democrats that are picking him at the moment see him as somebody, hey, he went and did something. He didn't just, this is not going to be a hope and change Democratic primary. This is going to be your goddamn right. I'm going to do this primary. And so I do think that, and I do think the failure of Biden's stylistic and the temperament of Biden. And I wonder, is that, I look at an Andy Bashir and a Wes Moore as two candidates that want to be sort of turn the temperature down, turn the page candidates. And it could be by 27, that is where the primary electorate's attitude is, especially if Democrats win both the House and Senate. I think then maybe the heat will have backed off a little bit. But if the same frustration that Democrats are expressing, like you, Pete, right now, is there in 27, then I don't know if the moderate and temperament governor idea is going to be as appealing, even if it's appealing to somebody like myself, who I considered myself to be more of a swing voter because I'm not comfortable ideologically in either party. That might not be what Democrats want. And they may consider electability not necessarily somebody with the moderate temperament, but somebody with an action temperament, with a take the bull by the horns temperament. Because as I mentioned to you earlier, one of the interesting things in my recent trip to Austin, in my interview with Wes Moore and the conversation I observed with Tim Walz, was that they both came down when they were asked to, the form of the question of what does Trump do well? He's always doing something, right? And Democrats are always asking a committee to look at an idea, and then they kick the tires, and then they see if an interest group is going to support them. And then maybe they'll implement the idea if they can find the votes after that. You get my point. So, I mean, we'll see where the attitude of the party is in 27. I think a lot of it will have to do with how successful or not that the party is in 26. But Pete, I think you've put I think you really identified the feeling that you have Democratic voters who are going to crawl on broken glass to vote, who have a negative view of the current leadership of the Democratic Party. There's a reason results matter more than promises. Just like there's a reason Morgan & Morgan has become America's largest injury law firm. For the last 35 years, they've recovered $25 billion for more than 500,000 clients. It includes cases where insurance companies offered next to nothing, short of shortchanging, seeing if they could get away with it. And Morgan & Morgan fought back, and they won millions. In Pennsylvania, one client was awarded $26 million. It was a staggering 40 times the amount that the insurance company originally offered. That offer, $650,000, whatever it took to sort of get away without paying. So with more than 1,000 lawyers across the country, Morgan & Morgan knows how to deliver for everyday people. So if you're injured, you're looking for a lawyer, check out forthepeople.com/ToddCast or dial #law, #529 on your cell phone. And remember, all law firms are not the same. So give Morgan & Morgan a look. Their fee is free unless they win.